Welcome to the Florida Veterans for Common Sense April meeting. Thank you very much for coming tonight. With that said, I will call Charles forward and he will introduce our speaker for the night.
Thank you very much. And I actually have one additional announcement related to the microforest for those of you who'd be interested. The Jacaranda Eco Park is one where we had planting about 2 weeks ago. We had like 50 kids. Some of you were out, very helpful. They're having an open house on Wednesday to unveil and engage the community in that park. We had one setback with one of our microforests, as you know, where the community destroyed it. We're never going to let that happen again. This community is being engaged in a series of open houses to take ownership of it, to do maintenance. So anybody who wants to be a part of that little open house at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, just let me know. Now, my introduction is going to be a real pleasure, and I'm going to start by acknowledging John Taylor. John Taylor is a nurseryman up in Manatee County. He runs a commercial nursery and has taken a real interest in microforests and kind of the broader environmental agenda. He's a member of the Lambda Alpha International, and his wife, Janelle, did I say it right? Janelle. Okay. I always have trouble with it. Even she's told me how to pronounce it. Anyway, she's also very engaged. And one of the many things that he did that's helpful to me is bring Commissioner George Kruse out to the microforest at Heritage Harbor shortly after its installation. And the commissioner was very interested in that and helped advance that agenda. Now, I'm going to set the table here with a little bit of a Republican or a little bit of a quip related to politics. And that is to say, I want you to know you're in front of a very Republican-friendly audience. But I'm talking about one Republican in particular who we hold very close to our heart, the late Senator John McCain. Okay, first of all, we love him because he served his country as a warrior. And just like our Vice President, Mike Burns, he flew missions over Vietnam, was shot down, and served time as a POW. So we love McCain for that reason. But we also loved him because he was a fighter for the environment. Whatever the political spectrum was on other issues, we knew he was there fighting for climate change. And there were other Republicans back then, the Chaffee family in Vermont, in Rhode Island, and the gubernator, Schwarzenegger, is a Republican with a strong environmental agenda. And that's one of the reasons we're excited to hear from you, is we know, in fact, your reputation has been so positive in terms of getting in, expressing dissatisfaction with some naiveties on environment or environmental disregard on the county commission up there in Manatee, and helping change the direction there in a way that could not be more important. Back to the issue of microforests, Commissioner Kruse put me in touch in a conference call with some administrative people, a Zoom, with Manatee County land people, like your parks manager, to discuss microforests, just to use his political cachet to raise awareness in their bureaucracy of this method that we espouse and approach someday, having microforests as part of the what might be called the natural fabric between the developments. So beyond that, there are not some specifics that I know that I invite you to talk about, but we are keenly interested in your environmental viewpoints. It's kind of what sounds like quite a positive change you've recently effected there. And any other topic you would like to speak to this veterans organization, we'd be very pleased to hear from. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner George Kruse.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Just to clarify this, I'm a Manatee County Commissioner, so I know we're meeting in Sarasota. I asked earlier, who's who, just to get a sense, because most of anything I could say anecdotally is going to be Manatee specific. That said, I'm from Sarasota. I grew up in Sarasota. My wife went to Riverview right over here down the road, and now into Mooney. So I know Sarasota well. I've spent the whole day here today. But stuff I want to talk about is Manatee County. But equally importantly, as Charles will be the first to tell you, things about the environment, things about development, things that are working well, things that are working poorly, transcend the county line. First off, it goes statewide, if not nationwide, in terms of some of the issues we're having with how things are being done. But equally importantly, when you talk specific to Manatee County and Sarasota County, we used to be one county, and the headwaters in Manatee County trend down into Sarasota, and the development in Sarasota trend up to the infrastructure in Manatee County. So while we're two separate counties, what I do in Manatee affects you if you're down here, and vice versa. So I think it's equally important. But I asked what I should talk about today. I had no idea. I was asked if I would come and talk, and they said, how about the environment and development? And I said, well, it's pretty convenient, since I just was the keynote speaker at the Farm Bureau annual dinner talking about agricultural land and environment. And then last week, I was the speaker at the Parish Civic Association talking about development. So I just kind of combine these two. Let's see how this goes. So the question I always get in Manatee County, and I'll start big and kind of go small, is, why are we building over everything? Why are we destroying our ag land? There's nothing left. So I see a head shaking. So I'll give you the punchline on that. I asked my development services, how much do we have any agricultural land left? Because Facebook says we do not. So I had them pull it up. Manatee County has 475,000 acres of land. Of that, 253,000 acres of that is still classified as agriculture. That's 53% of our land. An additional 55,000 acres, another 12%, is conservation land, meaning Manatee County today, 65% of our land, 2/3 of our land is still agriculture or conservation and not built upon, nor has any approval rights to be built upon. That is a substantial amount of land in Manatee County, in spite of what the conversation is, because I talked to ag, and this is kind of where my Farm Bureau conversation went, is some of the people in the ag industry were coming to me because they're effectively, some of them at least, being attacked as the bad guys. Like, if you sell your land, to developers, you're basically destroying our community. But I mean, it's their property, and we can't force them to do anything with it. But what you see is they are protecting the land. They are still working. We have a dairy farm, Dakin Dairy, up in Manatee County, and there were offers on that property, and he sold it to other dairy farmers and said he was going to only sell it to dairy farmers. So there is a concerted effort from the agricultural community, especially East County and Manatee County, to protect it. But what we see is all the land south of that ag land in Manatee County, like High Hat and so forth, and Sarasota County, is getting built on, which is going to start straining some of the infrastructure out there. And we're doing our part, I believe, to work on protecting that ag land, protect the watersheds. We had a policy, or have technically a policy, 2.1.2.8 Manatee County, which theoretically allowed people to build east of our development boundary. The new board came on in November because the citizens of Manatee County said enough's enough, and we are now removing that policy. In fact, it comes up, I think, next land use meeting, next month, is our first hearing to remove that policy, to effectively take away the one right developers would have to build east of our FDAB line, our future development area boundary line, to prevent people from continuing to build further and further east. However, and this is a trend, the state of Florida, every time they go up to Tallahassee for a legislative session, decides how they can destroy communities a little bit more each time. And they are working on a bill. And if you follow 1,000 Friends of Florida and everybody else, this is a hot topic bill. It's Senate Bill 1118. They're trying to designate effectively, for all intents and purposes, all agricultural land and enclave, which will give them as of right ability to build on that land without even coming to our board. It's not a matter of call your commissioner and tell them not to approve it. We won't even see it. until there's a bulldozer out there. And that's Senate Bill 1118, which is getting a lot of pushback. So as the state is wont to do, that same language has now started appearing in other bills. So that if you kill one bill, it conveniently was an amendment in another bill someplace else that's only tangentially related, and so it pops up someplace else. So you have to be careful, because they've shut down our ability for impact fees. They've shut down our ability for thoughtfully allowing for affordable housing. Now they're trying to shut down our ability to protect agricultural land at the interest of developers. So we as our board, you as your Sarasota board, or who's ever in Sarasota, needs to be thoughtful about what gets approved further and further out east. And I know people will say it's not really sprawl, but it is. And here's the problem with sprawl. And I try to explain this to my board, and I think they're getting it. I tried to explain it to my last board, and they didn't get it at all, or they were told not to get it. Sprawl is bad from an environmental standpoint, but equally important, and to go along with the Republican side of things. Look, I'm as free market as you can get. I don't like subsidies. I don't like bailouts. I don't like tariffs. I don't like taxes. I don't like any. But there's a free market element to it. But people can't keep building with someone else's money. And if you build, not only is it affecting the environment, but it's affecting the budget of your community, because now I have to build roads to it. I have to build infrastructure to it and utilities to it. I have to build a park for somebody, a school for somebody, a library for somebody. It's cost prohibitive to keep building further and further out. So outside of the environmental aspect of it, you've got the budgetary aspect of it. You got the fact that it's destroying our community because we have to keep building roads. So, you guys see it in High Hat, because you just had a couple of conversations, because it went back and forth relative to what you do with the Bee Ridge extension in Lorraine, because someone has to build roads to get into developments, and roads cause problems. I'm on the MPO board for the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Sarasota, Manatee County, and just last meeting, City of Northport wanted to put on our agenda to allow them to build a road directly through a conservation land preserve. And they wanted to build it because somebody in City of Northport over the years allowed them to build further and further out. And then they said, hey, if there's a hurricane, which there is like seemingly every other week during hurricane season now, we can't get out. So you need to provide us the exit to get out of the areas you allowed us to build. And the only way to do that is a north-south road that cuts straight up through this conservation land. Fortunately, the MPO said no, and we refused to put that on the agenda. But that's what starts happening as you get further and further out. It's not only causing the environmental effects at the time of the development, but it's causing the long-term environmental effects as you deal with servicing that development going out. So there are things we can do. There are things we as a government can do. There are things you as citizens can advocate for. Number one is you can take the land before it's built on. You can work on conservation easements and purchasing land for conservation land. Manatee County just passed a tax similar to what Sarasota already had to purchase land. And we've been doing a good job of purchasing of land, but purchasing land is expensive. Purchasing land is much more expensive than putting an easement on it if your sole purpose of it is just to prevent development. But we've been doing what we can. I went up a few weeks ago and met with Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson. We had about a 45-minute or so meeting one-on-one to talk about ways of expanding our dollars to make this work. And he gave us some good ideas about scraping development rights and reselling land where nobody can build on it. But my big focus has been for years trying to create a meaningful wildlife corridor from Myakka all the way up to Duet Preserve and to the north of Manatee County out to Hillsborough. So that's something that we're actively working on. And by doing that, not only are we protecting land and protecting watersheds, but we're creating effectively a firewall buffer for development, because at some point development, if it keeps going further east, is going to hit that wildlife corridor and be stopped in its tracks, which is beneficial to Myakka and beneficial to everyone else further out east. We're also working on protecting our wetlands. That was a hot button issue 2024 in our election when the rest of my board decided to gut our wetland buffers. They said that they didn't gut it. They just passed it to the state. But as I just said a few minutes ago, the state is terrible at protecting anything you care about. And so giving the state the rights to oversee our buffers proved a fallacy from the start when the very first application that came in, once that passed, was a developer proposing a 0-foot buffer with a gabion wall to go directly up to the wetlands on their coastal property. That fortunately is also being unwound. We heard the first hearing last land use meeting, and next month that'll be final once we get the transmittal back from the state to put our buffers back where they were. But really, the thing you need to realize is, and I'm not going to make this a long speech because I'd rather have questions and answers from people, is you have to come up with sensible ways for development. I'm not sitting up here saying you have to stop development as an environmental solution or as a development solution. It's not. We've had 25,000 new people move into Manatee County in the past 2 years. Our housing prices are through the roof. Our rental prices are through the roof. If you don't get a handle on that, then we're going to trade one problem for another problem. And that's not a sensible solution. We're trying to attract businesses, but we can't keep young, skilled workers in Manatee County because they don't want to live in Manatee County because there's no place they can afford to live and there's nothing they can afford to do because people are pushing back on it. And all people are doing is building 4,000 square foot single family homes further and further out east, further away from where they would work or shop or hang out with their friends. So we need to start focusing our development thoughtfully. You need to start considering pervious versus impervious surfaces. You need to start considering height and density rather than sprawl, vertical over horizontal. You need to start considering building close to employment centers and close to grocery stores and utilities rather than further and further out east, because we can't afford to have those people coming in from out east. We can't afford the utilities. We can't afford the infrastructure. And until you get a handle on that, that's where the development needs to stop, and it needs to be redirected, because 1,000 new units of infill is better environmentally and better for the budget than 250 homes sprawl. It just is. You may say it's 4 times more, but it's better in every possible way. And if you're going to sprawl out, we need to start figuring out how we're going to handle what's already been sprawling, which is why I've been pushing for multimodal. I've gotten yelled at because on the board, I've said I don't want to pave another inch of road. I hate roads. I'll say that on record because I've said it on record many times, because you can't build yourself out of traffic regardless of what somebody tries to pretend it is. It's factually incorrect. Statistics show if you put 2 more lanes on a road, you're just creating 2 more lanes of congestion in the long run. People direct themselves to that. But what you have done was just paved over another 40 plus feet of green space to put more asphalt on it and took down 100-year-old trees to create the right of way to build that wider road, which cost $8 million a lane mile to build, simply because everyone just feels that they have a right to get, not only be in their car, but a right to get someplace as fast as humanly possible, which just isn't a right I've ever found in the Constitution. You know, we're working on multimodal solutions. We're working on a dedicated trail system similar to Legacy, but we're trying to come up with an expanded version. Legacy is amazing for a recreational trail system. I'm working on ours being a recreational and commuter trail system. We are working on our trail system to be 15 feet wide instead of Legacy, because the intent is to paint 3 to 5 feet of it as a dedicated e-bike lane, so that people can actually commute on our trail system and get off our roads. We made all of our transit free. All of our buses are 100% free in Manatee County to encourage people to use mass transit and bus services rather than that. And when we did that in 2021, late 2021, we saw a 56% increase in ridership. That's been sustained. It has not gone down. We've had a substantial increase in ridership with no new buses, no new bus drivers, no new routes, just more people using the bus because now it's free and it's a hop on, hop off service, which is taking cars off the road. We created the water taxi to get out to the island. It started out as a 2-day service, then a 3-day service. Now it's a 5-day service, and almost every single one of those boats is sold out every single time it sails off. Those are cars that are staying off of our road. You need to come up with sensible solutions. You need to come up with creative solutions to keep cars off the road. Because if you can get cars off the road, you don't have to build more road. And if you don't build more roads, you keep more green space, you keep more dollars in your pocket. So if you put people closer to where they want to be, so they have to be on the road less, and you give them alternatives to being on the road, you can start getting ahead of this. Because as long as we allow ourselves to be a commuter community, as long as we allow ourselves to be a car-centric community, that's what people are going to do. And that is what's going to start destroying our like, nobody would move all the way out to Verna if there weren't roads to get in. But because they know the roads are going to be put in, they're willing to move further out. And then they're willing to drive across all these roads to get to downtown Sarasota or downtown Bradenton to get to work, only because we're subsidizing their transportation, subsidizing their commute with your dollars to build more roads at the expense of our environment, and the expense of your budget, and the expense of your quality of life. So we need to get ahead of these things now. And that's what Manatee County is doing. That's what I'm pushing Manatee County to do. I think we've got a lot of headway on this. We've been a lot more thoughtful on our development. We've been a lot more thoughtful on our capital improvement plan in terms of what we are or are not going to do with roads. And we've definitely been a lot more thoughtful when it comes to infill locations and being more considerate relative to multimodal. And I think in the long run, if the board stays in the same direction, we're going to start seeing some positive impacts across the board with that. Positive impacts of keeping people away from the east, allowing for more dark skies, allowing for more buffers around Mayaca and the areas that are very environmentally sensitive, and start putting people where they really should be to create the feeling of the community, the walkable, multimodal community close to employment centers where it should be, and leaving our East County alone so that we can enjoy some semblance of old Florida and Manatee County. So with that, I will open it up to any questions you may have.
And before we start with Mike Burns, I have a question for you.
Sure.
How is the state doing? Isn't there a conservation fund? How is that shared with the counties?
There's the Florida Forever Fund. There's a couple of funds right now. This year, Senate President Albritton is working on the Rural Renaissance Bill, which already passed through. It hasn't been signed by the governor yet. That's another $300 million. So there are funds available. None of the funds that I'm aware of just transcend down like CARES Act funds did or other things. What it is we can apply for those funds, and we do. And you have to get your property ranked. So they'll come up with their own rankings. In fact, myself and Wilton Simpson talked about this. They come up with their own rankings of properties for Florida Forever that they want. And if they want it, if it's in their top 10, then they'll just go out and buy it themselves. They don't even need us. If it doesn't fall in the top 10, then you come in with matching funds and you propose to them to move it up the rankings until the money's depleted each year. And then presumably, hopefully, God willing, it gets replenished. Although we'll see what happens this year because there's a lot of infighting up there. So we've used it for a handful of our properties. When we bought Crooked River, they funded about 80% of that. That was just north of the river in Ellington. They're supposed to be coming behind us for a big chunk of, if not almost all, of an expansion of Emerson Point. We have a couple of great preserves out in West Manatee County. The one everyone talks about is Robinson Preserve. Rightfully so. It's an amazing place. But just north of the river is Emerson Point. It's the western part of Sneed Island. I love Emerson Point. It's awesome. But it's been the same size forever. We went out and bought another 90 acres immediately next to it, which had development rights. So the alternative was sell it to us, or they were going to sell it to someone else that would have had rights for 270 homes, pushing right up to our preserve. So we went out and basically paid them what they wanted to buy that, not only to present the homes, but to expand our preserve. The state fortunately came in and put up a big chunk of that behind it. So there's no dedicated funds. It comes in as we make application for it. But they've been pretty good to us. Well, let me just clarify one thing. I'm sorry. I don't want to keep cutting you there. But the one issue with the state money, because sometimes we get people yelling at us for not taking state money at times. Like, I'll use an example. I can't really use a real example because it's a negotiation right now. I'll use a hypothetical example. If somebody wants $20 million for a piece of property because there's a developer that wants to build on it and they think they can get it rezoned, whatever, the state can only fund the appraised value of a property. And so we've run into a situation where somebody thinks their property is worth $20 million. They want $20 million, but then the state goes out and gets an appraisal for $8 million. Well, the state will only fund $8 million. So unless we have $12 million to overpay for a piece of property, then that becomes hard to use with state funds. So there is a bit of a challenge with the state funds because of their appraised value. They're not just funding 50% on a match or 75%. They'll fund the appraised value, which in today's day and age, with all the hyper development, with all the glossy eye brokers thinking everything's worth way more than it is, we've had a handful of projects that have had a meaningful disconnect between what the state would fund. And even when they've come in and said, we'd love to give you $20 million, let's get an appraisal, and it comes in at 8. They're capped by their law that they can't go over that 8. So that's become a little bit of a problem.
My friend here lives in that area of El Conquistador to become 75 that goes up to Cortez. And it seems like there's hundreds of new things being built on one side of the road. Will they also build more on the other side of the road? And was that agricultural land?
Sure. There was 2 major, not a whole lot's been built in West Bradenton for quite some time because it was built out. That's where the original Bradenton was. There were 2 major projects that were approved, developments, mixed use developments, approved way before my time. One was Long Bar Point, which is now known as Aqua. That one's the one that had a multi-day land use hearing that they had to have at the convention center because so many people came and spoke out against it. That was approved 2015 or 16, I don't know, way before I got on the board. That one's being built right now. That's the one you see on the west side of El Con. There's some apartments. They have the huge lagoon and stuff. The one that you're referring to is a major planned development. Used to be called Lake Flores when it was approved. Now it's called Seaflower, I think, maybe. They changed the name of the project. That was ag forever because it was part of Manatee Fruit Company, which went all the way up to where the port is now and all the way down in all West Bradenton. It was all grapefruit and things like that. It was all one family, one company from the top of Manatee basically to the bottom. The whole West Coast was one family. That was approved, I believe, even earlier than Aqua. That was approved back in 2011 or 12 or something, like over a decade ago. That was approved. So this board has had nothing to do with that approval. That approval way predates every single member of the board. Strangely enough, because everyone hates our incumbents, I just started my second term. I'm the senior most person on my board. So if it predates me, it predates everybody. That corner of 75th, the southwest corner, is commercial. That's a hotel, retail, all that. That's that corner that's currently cleared out, where we've had the dust issues and so forth. We've had to red tag them and shut them down. The other side of it, the IMG side of it, call it, all that green space, that's the residential side of it. There is retail component to it, but that's the residential side of it. But that's been on the books forever. But the commercial starting first. They sold off the commercial piece to somebody else to build the commercial. That was the first piece being built.
Stacy.
There's no affordable housing in that project.
Okay, back to the election that you just won. From my perspective, you committed an act of environmental heroism because the previous board had voted, as you mentioned, against wetlands and mangroves. Now you have a new board that is voting in favor of those things. How did you pull it off? Was there a little luck involved? Was it coercion through you to grassroots people? How did you assemble around you from a relatively disadvantaged or minority position a board that now sees the light as far as protecting environmental values?
Sure, I could try to answer that roughly speaking. Here's the thing. I didn't pull off anything. I've tried for years just to come up with common sense, sensible alternatives to things I felt was wrong in Manatee County. I didn't care if it was a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. I didn't care when I was voting against that wetland thing, and I spoke endlessly on the dais about that, I was called a communist. I was told that George Soros was funding my campaign. I was called anti-Second Amendment, pro-choice, pro-everything, that it was Biden's Green New Deal that I was trying to push on Manatee County. Like, I just don't care. Say whatever you want about it. I vote the way I think is right. And I think that's different than, unfortunately, how a lot of local people on boards vote and act. So I think that resonated, not just with the Republicans, it was a Republican primary, but with everybody. So there was a lot of people like John who advocated very strongly in Elwood Park for me. And there were people out in Elcon who advocated hard for me, and Anna Marie Island. It wasn't me. I mean, my opponent spent over $600,000 trying to take me out. I raised less than 60 grand. This wasn't a money thing. I only sent 1.5 mailers because I couldn't afford 2 mailers. It was 1.5. I had to be strategic on the other one to get it done. But it was a lot of speaking. There was a 90-day window where I spoke over 50 times. And I asked everybody I spoke to, go tell 10 other people. And fortunately, they did. If they didn't tell 10 other people, if they didn't all put magnets on the back of their car, if they didn't invite me into their living room to speak, it wouldn't have mattered. But my side, if you will, my group decided if we have it for too many years in Sarasota and Manatee and every place in the state of Florida and every place in the country for that matter, all the voters are uninformed and they get suckered based upon a base. Our guess was if all we did was inform people, I'm not telling inform people right or wrong, just inform people of facts and you make your own decision. I may say something, you may disagree with me and want to vote against me. That's fine. I told a lot of people to vote against me. I said, all I'm going to do is tell you what I truly believe. And if you don't like that, go vote for the other guy. And I'm okay with that as long as it's an informed vote for the other guy. So our whole mission, when I set up my Substack years before, when I started doing town halls years before, it was just simply to give people facts and information to educate themselves, hoping that an educated electorate would make the right decision. And in 2024, an incredibly educated electorate came out with the help of newspapers, with the help of citizens, with the help of all of us campaigning. And they made the right decision. And I'm hoping that transcends to 26 and 20. I'm hoping we've crossed a precipice in Manatee County where we now have an informed group of citizens that want to remain informed and that elections going forward will be for the actual best candidate that's going to look out for their pockets and look out for their quality of life and not get suckered by mailers and TV ads and all the garbage you saw for all the years prior with all the PAC money and all this other crap. That we have passed a point where it's not going to happen again. And it worked in 2024. We'll see if that transcends beyond. But that's how we did it. It wasn't to con anybody or sucker anyone or beg anyone for votes. It was to give people facts and let them make their own decision. And I believe they made the right decisions.
You mentioned, which is very important, most of us probably feel that democracy works best when we can keep decisions that are appropriate for the local community at the local level. Why is the legislature taking these decisions away from our local politicians and taking it to Tallahassee where we have very little, if any, say?
Because everybody wants power. And that's just, I don't care if it's business. I don't care if it's politics. I don't care if it's in a family setting. People want power. They want to look important. They want to feel important. And you always punch down. And when you're in Tallahassee, you treat county commissioners and city councilmen as these incompetent people that are no better than an HOA president because you're super important because you go up there for 2 whole months in Tallahassee because you were able to raise more money from certain people and send out glossier mailers than somebody else. Now all of a sudden you're inherently smart when you get up there, and they got to prove that. I watch these, and I'm not saying that lightly. I watch a lot of the sessions up there, and they constantly talk about local government doesn't know what they're doing. We need to protect the citizens from their local government. Now they're trying to pass term limits across the board for every county commissioner in the entire state of Florida because county commissioners can't possibly be there for more than 2 terms, even though there's a lot of rural counties that only have 20-something thousand people living there. They can barely find the 5 people to sit there in the first place. Now they have to replace them every 8 years. It doesn't make any logical sense. They're trying to put so many restrictions on local governments, and then they try to pass their own version. Right now, we have a problem paying for our roads because we don't get enough impact fees because they passed a bill restricting our ability to collect more impact fees. But they said if it's an extraordinary circumstance, you can collect more. So we're going through the process of declaring an extraordinary circumstance so we can collect more, which I never would have done with my last board, but now my new board all of a sudden wants to do it. They are running a bill this year to change the definition of extraordinary circumstance just so local governments can't pass extraordinary circumstances to collect the impact fees. So we're not going to be able to build the roads. But they're also running 1118, which allows people to keep building further and further out that we have to provide roads for while they're restricting the money to keep us from building the roads. It makes no sense. And then we have these regional planning councils that are amazing because they all work together. All these counties work together to come up with best ways of tying counties together and transportation and buses and everything else. They're trying to run a bill this year to eliminate all regional planning councils. It costs the state nothing. It costs them nothing. There's no reason to ban it, other than the fact they don't want us all talking to each other. So they're trying to ban it. We have Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. It's great. When we had issues with flooding after Debbie and people came to us and said, you need to do an independent investigation as to why this flooding occurred. We reached out to Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council for no money. They hired their own consultant. They ran their own study, completely independent of us, to present their findings so we could better fix our community in the future for the next inevitable Debbie with the regional planning. They're trying to unwind that. The state just wants control. They just want power. They just want to take over everything. That's why, look, I get it. Nobody likes taxes. Taxes are terrible. Nobody likes paying for a house they already own. I don't disagree. But money has to come from someplace. I don't care what you say about it. You could be a capital L libertarian all you want and say that everyone's going to build private roads and there's going to be tolls in front of everyone's house. It's not going to happen. That's not true. There's some level of revenue that's necessary to pay for teachers and pay for police officers, pay for fire departments, regardless of how libertarian you are. We're not tariffing our way out of property taxes, okay? So where's that going to come from? The only way, regardless of what Governor DeSantis says, is sales tax. We don't have an income tax. You can't increase income tax, and nobody's ever going to pass an income tax in the state of Florida. It's a feather in our cap that we don't have an income tax. You increase sales tax. Guess where 100%, well, technically 1% of your sales tax comes here because that was a referendum, but all the rest of the sales tax goes to Tallahassee. And then they bestow it back to us with their good graces and based on what they feel like we deserve. You want to take away all local government revenue, 100% of it, and pass it all to Tallahassee? You know what kind of strings you're going to be attached getting that money back? If 100% of all of our revenue that pays for all of our services, our library staff, our parks and recreation, our lifeguards, our bus drivers, our teachers, our principals, our fire department, our police officers, if 100% of it's in Tallahassee and now we have to go up there and beg for our money, like it's going to be detrimental to local control. I honestly don't know why we have 67 counties at this point in time anyway, because they just kind of do what they want. But we need to fix that. That's the state's becoming a little too overreaching. And I wrote a Substack. I don't know how many of you read my Substack. I wrote a half in jest Substack where I pretended it was half pretended. Part of it was true. A conversation between me and somebody in Tallahassee as a kind of a stage play as my last Substack, explaining how they're like, you can't do this. Okay, I'll do this instead. Okay, we thought that. So now we're going to pass this bill. Okay, I'll do this. Oh, then we're going to pass this bill. And all those bills are true. All those bills are actually in Tallahassee this year. And every step of the way, when you try to come up with a sensible alternative for the good of the community to lower your cost of living and increase your quality of life, they pass something else to make it hard again. It's very difficult. Of course, we get yelled at for it, but hopefully something starts changing there. But it's when you have a supermajority, look, I'm Republican. I'm on that side, but supermajorities are terrible. I don't care who you are, because when you have no one looking over your shoulder and nobody can calm you down, why would you calm down? Like there's no checks and balance at this point in time.
Okay, we have a couple of questions online here. The first question is, can you schedule some BOCC meetings east of 75 so we don't have to drive downtown?
We have done 2, 3 east of 75. All of them were work sessions. The issue with scheduling real meetings any place outside of our chamber is the logistics. We have a lot of rules and restrictions relative to it. We have to record it. We have to have the clerks there taking the meetings. You have to have the technology set up. it's expensive to move that tower. We did a work session on the future development boundary out at Bethany Baptist Church out in Mayaca. The cost and the time associated with moving METV and everything else out there to have one meeting to meet state statute requirements of notice and so forth and publication video was a pain, number one. Two, our meetings have a lot of different items with a lot of different staff. So we've got a staff of hundreds, if not thousands of people sitting in our building, watching it in live stream. And if an item comes up that's relevant to them, they come racing down the stairs of the elevator to be in the chambers in case they need it. If we're outside of the county building, we would effectively have to have all of staff with us sitting around waiting in case they're needed for something. It's very difficult to do. It's not, we can't turn the county commission meetings into a road show. We can do it a little bit with work sessions. And we did one at Lake Ranch High School last year. We did one at Parish High School last year. We did one at Mayaca 2 years ago. We have done it. I'm more than willing to do that because I don't need staff for that. And I don't need all the clerks for that. But doing a whole BOCC meeting is very difficult, if not impossible to do on the road without it costing too much and being too much of a headache.
Okay, so the next question is from Jack Merriam. He's actually the chair of our environmental working group. He says, I'm a Manatee County voter who voted for you. You just made me extremely happy that I did. What is the state doing with and to our colleges and universities? New College was doing a great job just of protecting their waterfront.
I mean, we have nothing. We have absolutely nothing to do with that whatsoever. The last time New College came to us had to do with the Powell Crosley estate, and I voted no on. Well, everyone voted no. It didn't even get a second to move it forward. That said, the state's going to do what the state's going to do. All I ask is if you're going to run Doge things over every county to make sure we're being efficient, do it for every single one of your colleges as well, and be honest with the findings.
Okay, I actually have a question here. First, a comment. First of all, thank you for coming and talking to us. And what you do and your leadership in Manatee County are really important to us here in Sarasota County. It shows us what the art of the possible is. And when we go to our commissioners, we can point to Manatee County and said, see, they can do it. Why can't you? So that's a pretty powerful argument, I think. A lot of times officials don't want to be out in the lead, but if they see somebody else has done it, they're more likely to do it. And then the question is, you kind of alluded to the balance between development and protecting the environment and housing. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about what efforts in Manatee County are going on to increase affordable housing. There's a lot, even in the paper today, about the lack of affordable housing in the area, and for teachers and fire and police and just regular folk that are just really struggling to find a place to live.
Affordable housing is my number one thing. Everyone knows that. I campaigned in 2020 on affordable housing. It's been my number one focus is housing, because I think there's never a way of solving it, but there's ways of making it better if you have a government willing to do it. And it's like that old thing where, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, if you're government, everything looks like throw money at it. That's not the best solution. It's a solution. It's a solution, but not the best solution. I get asked to speak all over. I speak at United Way Suncoast events on affordable housing. I spoke at the Florida Housing Summit last spring. I was the speaker at the Florida Housing Coalition last August for their annual meeting. Because I'm trying to come up with unique ways of doing affordable housing. One of the problems we have right now is, I think, across the board, this is statewide. I think the incentives are wrong if you're going to use money for it. The incentives historically has been AMI up to 120%. AMI is area median income. Around here, we're in the same MSA with Sarasota, Manatee. That's about $105,000 of income. That nobody, look, I get it. Everyone's having a hard time paying for anything right now, but nobody's going to look at someone making $105,000 and say, oh, poor attorney. That doctor really is hurting. Like 105,000 is a decent amount of money. Affordable housing is supposed to be for your first year deputy at your sheriff's office and your teacher and the young professionals just starting out. The incentives are wrong. So I've been working hard to get rid of the 120% threshold, even if it's just a temporary, like 5-year hiatus on it. We got rid of it for monetary benefit. Now you can get density bonus, but you don't get any impact fee credits or permit fees waived or anything. I am looking to get rid of even the density bonus portion up to 120 and cap everything at 80%. 80% is a much more reasonable amount based on the current rents. 120% AMI rents are higher than the actual market rents in Manatee County. Like the average rent in Lakewood Ranch is lower than the rent you could charge for that affordable property at 120%. So we're trying to get rid of that to encourage people to actually build things that are more quote unquote affordable. But that's not the solution. We're kind of talking about environment. And I had this conversation with my board a few months ago. Part of the problem is the only way you see affordable housing getting built any place, the occasional Habitat for Humanity notwithstanding, are these huge apartment complexes. Like every time affordable housing gets approved is, hey, if you let me build 400 apartment units, 25% of them have to be affordable to get the bonus. So I'll build you 100 affordable housing units in this 400 unit apartment complex. Great. I get 100 affordable housing units. That is a massive complex. That is paving over an insane amount of acreage, putting an insane amount of flood risk and stormwater risk. It's putting 400 units is upwards of 800 cars, all going out the same exit onto the same road, causing the same issues with the infrastructure. All the kids in that complex are all going to the same school, causing the capacity issues at that school. They're all competing for the same job someplace. Usually those properties are nowhere near transit. That's not the best solution, because the only way I get affordable housing is to destroy massive swatches of land and infrastructure to accommodate 100 units. My proposal has been to encourage what they call affordable by design, which is essentially small units, infill pocket units, things that become affordable simply because they're smaller or because of their location. And they don't cause the environmental or the infrastructure damage that other things do. We did that 2 years ago, and I stole Sarasota's idea with the half dwelling units, encouraging people to build smaller apartment units because apartment units are getting out of hand. Like 1-bedroom apartments were 1,200 square feet with a den and a dog park and a sauna and cabanas by the pool. Like nobody needs that if they need a roof over their head. They just need a place to live. So we encourage smaller units by allowing them to build more of them if they build smaller, and smaller units are just going to be by definition cheaper because even on a per square foot, the absolute price is cheaper. What I'm pushing my board to do, and I think we'd be the first county in the state to do it, is twofold. One, I hate parking requirements. I'm trying to get rid of all my minimum parking requirements because parking lots are just endless paving and asphalt and 90% of the time pointless. That makes land much more expensive. That makes the cost of construction that much more expensive. It creates that much more impervious surface. More times than not, because in a situation where you just don't need that much space. There's a lot of empty parking spots. But more importantly, for affordable housing, to answer the question, I'm trying to get rid of all minimum lot sizes. I don't mean shrink them. I mean get rid of them entirely. In Manatee County, depending on the zoning, a lot of our zoning requires a minimum 7,500 square foot lot. Those are not cheap. They're not prevalent. And if you have a 7,500 square foot lot and you paid for a 7,500 square foot lot, you're going to put like a 3,000 to 3,500 square foot home on top of it. Why not? You got the land to do it. A 3,500 square foot home is not cheap. I don't care who you are. I don't care how cheap you build it and what kind of cabinets you put in. That is going to be a house that people can't afford to pay. I've got hundreds of surplus lots just sitting on my books that we don't give to people because they're too small. You can't build anything on them. If I can go start giving away 1,000 square foot, 1,500 square foot lots that are presently undevelopable, that are scattered all over the county. So no one house is going to affect the road in front of it. No one kid's going to affect the school. They're spread out evenly. They're near places of employment. They're near a Starbucks where a barista can live. They're near a school where a teacher works. and you come and get a free 1,000 square foot lot for me because it's surplus, and you put a 400 or 500 square foot tiny home on there, even if you rent it for $3 a foot, which is way higher than our average rent, $3 a foot on a 400 square foot tiny home is $1,200 a month. That fits into a 30% ratio for a teacher. Like, that's how you start fixing affordable housing. We changed our ADU. We allowed ADUs a couple years ago, and I fought the size of the ADUs, saying this is too small and pointless, but we capped it at 750 square feet, same as Sarasota. We went back this year, and I pushed the board successfully, and we redid it, where now all the ADUs behind people's houses can be up to 80% of the square footage of the primary residence. So if you have a 3,000 square foot house and you have a big enough lot where you can do it, you could build a 2,400 square foot ADU in your backyard, which is going to allow even more opportunity for more housing spread out, not in one place, 400 units. I'm talking 400 units spread all over town, some in Ellington and Parrish, and some in Palmetto, and some in South Manatee, spread all over. We're going to get more units this way by doing this. We're going to get cheaper units by design this way, because a house behind someone else's house is going to be cheaper than a primary residence. A 400 square foot house is going to be cheaper than a 1,400 square foot house. An infill lot in Palmetto is going to be cheaper than a 7,500 square foot lot in Lakewood Ranch. That's how we're working on affordable housing. You need creative solutions to it. And if we can do that, coupled with the free transit, coupled with trying to bring more businesses in to give people employment, then we can start moving a needle. We're not going to move the needle by just approving apartment complexes everywhere. We need to start being more creative to come up with duplexes and triplexes and residential over retail, so that people have someplace to go straight downstairs from their place, and you can put it infill on 14th Street and all these other major corridors. That's how you're going to start moving the needle on housing.
Thank you very much. Excellent. We appreciate it. How about? We'd like to thank our speakers, and with no further announcements or ado, meeting is adjourned.